Hey, Sam here. Hope you're good. So, going to talk about how to rewire the brain for discipline. Probably, if you're watching this video, you're a dad who is ambitious, wants to go after their job, have goals, be successful, and is driven in that area, but also doesn't want to sacrifice their family for that, and potentially even their own health. And so, we look to do this by eliminating distractions. And so the thing is, a lot of guys will tend to eliminate distractions by willpower, cutting them out cold turkey. And it doesn't work. And this is why, because we've actually wired our brain at the moment for distractions. And so we've got there because of the dopamine feedback loop, building habits, dopamine feedback, telling us that things are good, and ultimately it sort of becomes a bit of a habit. Now, of course, one thing that we have to also understand is that, let's say it's social media as a distraction or TV, these guys are very, very good at keeping us there. Okay, they spent probably millions of pounds in wanting us to stay on that platform and hiring people to be able to do that. So this is how that's why like willpower and going cold turkey doesn't work, because like everything's sort of working against you in a way, including your own brain. And so, of course, this is like my own version of this. So we take action. Got the wrong pen up. So we take some form of action, right? Now, the reason why I put action there is because that could be anything from, like, say, scrolling on social media. It could be buying something. So often this is something that's overlooked, but buying all the time is a distraction, always buying stuff, getting an Amazon delivery every single day. That these are all in the dopamine feedback loop. So it could even be things like alcohol. It could be like junk food. Um, Probably like procrastination to a certain extent. And so we take the action, whatever it is, right? And scrolling goes further than that. It's like notifications, right? It's messages. It's just phone use in general, and this tends to be the worst one. Of course, as well, we've got TV. So we take an action, and we sort of feel good, right, afterwards. So that action is one of those things, and then we sort of get a reward from it. We feel good, right, which is ultimately dopamine being released. So we have the action and we get the reward for it. Now, let's say in social media terms, this is like we're posting, or we're taking an action or something like that. We're posting on social media, or we're just going on to have a look and scroll. We then see a notification, or we see like our favorite influencers posted, or maybe just someone that you like, and so we go on and we get this dopamine hit and reward from that, right? Which then, you know, makes us sort of remember that. Our brains remember when we get this kind of this hook, right? This reward, because ultimately, like, the brain wants you to feel good. Like, we want to feel good in ourselves. And so it remembers, like, there's a functionality to it, and it remembers for a reason. And so we get the reward. And then, it can obviously become a habit, which is its own little loop: cue, routine, reward, right? So there's a cue. So let's just, one of the examples that I always use is, say, you like walking past Greg's or something like that, and it's something you do every single morning. At one point, you maybe gone in and bought a pastry or a bacon sandwich or whatever. Your brain then releases the dopamine, like, sweet, it feels good. And then that's the reward. that's the routine, sorry, that's the action. You go in and take that, and then the reward is that it feels good, it tastes nice, and you feel better for it. So then next time you walk past a Greg's, your brain remembers that. Okay, so it's like the cue, routine, and reward, right? That's kind of the habit feedback loop there. And so we end up in this habit feedback loop, and of course, like this, we get the reward, and it creates this sort of habit. And as I said, like the reward can be many different things. For example, let's just say in buying stuff. Well, the thing is, like, you'll probably buy it, and then you've got an anticipation between the action and the reward. It's like, oh, I just want it to be here now. And when it comes, you're like, yes, and it's a flood of dopamine. It makes you feel good. And, so then ultimately, what's going to happen again? Because dopamine is going to decrease afterwards, you're not going to feel as good anymore. It's going to lead back to the action. Now, of course, there's steps in between, right? But that's kind of, in essence, what happens. Yeah. And it kind of is the way that we get stuck into the Netflix binge, or the alcohol, or eating junk food, because ultimately dopamine goes after a while because your brain wants to balance out everything. So it decreases dopamine and increases the sort of pain, as it's called, pain mode, or like so that's low mood, loss of focus, irritability, that sort of stuff, right? And so it brings those down. So then ultimately you want to take action again, because you memorize it, so you take action, and then this is how you end up in this habit loop of cue, routine, reward, right? Which is ultimately, again, the dopamine feedback loop as well. But in a nutshell, that's kind of what happens, and how we end up in the distraction loop, right? And how we sort of wire our brains for distraction, because we're needing more and more, in the end, right, dopamine to actually feel anything. Because of course, like with all of this, our bodies get used to the amount we're subjecting them to, we're having or doing or whatever, right? It gets used to the amount, and so we need more and more of this to be able to like feel anything and feel good in life, right? And so what we need to do is sort of think of our current life as an operating system, just like on an iPhone, because obviously, like, why would you have anything else but an iPhone? Let's be honest here, right? Yeah. Apologies, all you Android users, or Google, or whatever, like Android. iPhone's the one, but this has also happened because of something else, and this is what I'm going to go through. If we think of our life right now as like a current operating system on the iPhone, or whatever phone you want to choose. I'll let you choose another phone, right? So it's the current model. Now, what is this made up of? Well, it's made up of our environment. Now, that's not like save the environment type of environment. That's sort of like where we grew up, who our family is, and that family is included in that environment. Our ethnicity, our culture, basically everything, our background, I guess what happened to us growing up, if there's any trauma, or if there's anything like that. Our environment covers a ton of things, and that ultimately, dictates who we are sort of now and who we end up becoming, unless you've done a ton of work on yourself. Ultimately, we're probably just the version that's evolved from our environment, the people that we hang around with the most, especially, our family. But there's tons of different factors in this, okay? And everyone, that's why everyone is so different. Of course, as well, it's going to be our beliefs. Now, of course, they sort of come from our environment, but our beliefs are going to make a massive impact on what our current operating system is, right? And so maybe we just want to get out of this distraction loop, but we can't because we believe that we can't, right? We say, oh, I'm going to do it this time, and you try and convince yourself, but deep down, there's an emotional charge, probably generally being really honest and going deep, like straight away, is a lack of self-worth. But when we believe things, right, it's going to become our reality. Whatever we believe becomes our reality. Okay. And so that's really, really important to understand. So obviously there needs to be an upgrade in beliefs as well, but we're going to go through that in a sec. And then, of course, our identity, which really is made up from these things here, right? Our identity. So this is made up of the environment and beliefs, and that's kind of what our identity is. But our identity, right? So let's just draw a stick man here. So this is our past selves, right? Now, we might be fairly close to that, but a lot of the time, this is now, and this is future. Sizes don't mean anything there, by the way. Just terrible at drawing. So we've got the past here. Past. Okay. So ultimately what happens now here is often we're trying to push forward to let's go for push forward, right? But so we maybe make progress, or we maybe get a little bit along the way, but then what happens is, our past identity pulls us back into the here and now, and or even into past self. And so, when we're talking about this here, this is why, because ultimately we've wired our whole lives for distraction, for instant gratification, just to feel good, to feel anything in life. And so we keep on going back. And our past self is sort of like these chains, right? It's almost like I always liken it to, imagine you're going to do the 100-meter sprint, and maybe a Usain Bolt or something like that. And there's these three versions of you there, or two versions, right? There's now and the future. Now is like having these chains on your back. It's like there being sort of like a massive lorry or whatever behind you, and it's attached to you, and you're so when you set off, like, there's not going to be very much forward momentum. There's not going to be very much going forward, right? And of course, maybe through grit and determination and pure willpower, you might actually get somewhere. But ultimately, if you get up enough momentum, I mean, this will never happen, but let's just say it for the illustration purposes, you might get run over by the truck in the end. So this is kind of like, it's holding you back. It's holding you into that past identity, right? Whereas, this future person is like Usain Bolt. They're fast off the mark, and they sprint, and they win the race. And that's because he's freed himself of those chains. They're gone. Because we've changed our beliefs, which have changed our reality, and because we've upgraded our environment, maybe, or we've identified the areas that need upgrading in our environment. So it's about stepping into this future self now, right? It's not about this is going to be, you have to be placed in the future. We need to step into that identity in that future now. And so instead of it being, us constantly going back into the past because of our beliefs, we can't do this, when we're looking at, say, like junk food, or scrolling through notifications, it's like, oh, I deserve this, or I just need to check this one thing, oh, I'll just watch one more show. And all of this is the past, keeping us stuck. So this is all here basically why we've been programmed for distractions, okay, and how we've ended up getting there. And so this is our current operating system here, All right, all of this is our current operating system. And so how do we upgrade our system? Of course, right? Like an iPhone updates all the time, it seems to be. How do we update? How do we upgrade our operating system? Well, through this. When you think about it, right? There's two things that generally will be updated, right? Most of the time it's bug fixes. But there's also sometimes new features too. Okay, so we have to sort of look at this and upgrade these areas. So we need to upgrade our operating system and rewire our brain for discipline. And this is what I'm going to go through now and how to do. And this is exactly, to be honest, what the high performing dads have done inside of my group. We have a client, don't want to mention any names because I don't actually have permission to say this, although I'm sure they wouldn't mind. Is a business owner and 3 kids, family, wants to be a great dad, but also wants to strive for a better business, wants to make more money, wants to have more impact, and just have more success. And of course, balancing and juggling all that is really difficult because often you end up having to choose one or the other. And my point here is that you don't. But when he joined, he was distracted. He was constantly doing work, but not really getting anywhere. He was always drained, tired, completely like that wired tired, where like you can't switch off. He could never switch off from work. He could never switch off from his business, but he was still trying to be a good dad. So he'd feel the pressures from both sides pulling him in opposite directions. And this created this kind of imbalance in his life where he couldn't do anything. And so what we end up doing is sort of looking at the bug fixes that we needed to do and the new features that we needed to implement or add. And now like he can go week on week. Of course, sometimes priorities shift, right? So for example, one week might look different to the other, but now he has that ability of balancing both ambition and work and stepping forward in business with being a good dad and being present, doing the dishes as a stupid example, right? Doing the dishes before bed, or, being there and playing Lego, or, without being on the phone or checking emails, or, always thinking about work. And ultimately that's created a clearer and more clarity mind, right? A clearer mind because the energy's there. There's much more energy because you're not constantly stressed all the time and thinking about work, which drains the energy. There's more. He's got better health now. He'd never exercised or worked out before, but he exercises now and he goes out running sometimes with his kids, but mostly by himself on his lunch break. He goes out and gets in walks and gets to clear his head that way. And he has this much bigger clarity over his life and much more energy to be able to do these things, and he's much more focused inside of work periods now in the periods that he chooses, and he gets more done because of that. And so how do you do it, right? What do we need to do to upgrade it? So we need to sort of fix these bugs, right, that are in our system right now. And so what are like some of the bug fixes are the distractions, right? So these are the sort of the distractions, and we need to first of all identify them. Like, what are they? What are the distractions that are holding us back from getting into a better life, a better balanced life, or upgrading our operating system? Again, I've talked about them up here. So it might be procrastination, it might be scrolling or phone usage, it might be buying stuff all the time, TV, alcohol, junk food. Like, what is it that's holding you back, right? And ultimately, it's distractions because, like I said, we have been wired for it, and I think it's the normal now in a lot of society, which doesn't help, right? So you have to be willing to jump out of the norm, being honest, right? Because not everyone is going to eat a meal without any distractions, without any phone scrolling, right? Let's say you're eating your lunch at the office or at home, and there's no phones, there's nothing, right? We get rid of those distractions. Not many people do that. You have to be standing out. So we fix the bugs, right? We identify the ones that really are going to need fixing, and then of course we look to fix them, right? So we look to put some structures in place to be able to fix those. Now, how do we do that, right? So what we do is we need to identify where we're at, identify the distractions that are keeping you in this loop, and we need to break that loop. Okay. Now, the big thing here is these bug fixes, they're going to make the operating system run more smoothly. So from fixing these, we're going to get more focus. Okay. So we're going to be able to do better work. We're going to be able to do more focused work, just like I was saying about my client there, more focused work. So you can actually go deep into work and be able to get more done in like 3 hours than you probably were all day. This is what happened to me. The start of the year, so I've just had a baby, and at the start of the year when I went back to work, I was stressed to the max. I was overwhelmed, stressed. I didn't know how I was going to cope. Ultimately, I actually thought I was going to have to completely get rid of my business. And the reason for it is because I wasn't focusing. Obviously, I was tired, right? But I wasn't focusing on what was necessary. And in the moments of doing work, I was distracted by notifications, by messages, by social media. I would always be like, oh, I just need to check this one thing, or I just need to go on my emails, or I just need to check Slack. And I'd always be distracting myself and in the distraction loop, right? So it allows for more focused work, which obviously gets more done like I do now. Yesterday I worked 5 hours, and the rest of the time I spent on stuff that I enjoyed, like gym, going to the gym. I meal prep my food, so it's healthy, so it's good. It's fueling my brain, it's fueling my productivity, it's fueling my home time. And I also got to read a bit, I got to learn a bit, self-development and business development. Outside of that, a little bit. I also got some quality time with my family. I managed to have a good few hours with my son. So it's going to allow for more focus, of course, right? That's a big thing. Getting rid of distractions is also going to allow for more energy, right? Because distractions drain energy. As I was just saying there, like, when we're constantly, the problem as well with, to go alongside, I was talking about me at the start of the year, was not just the fact that I can now do deeper work. It allows me to get work done, which before I was half finishing, and I was trying to get it all done in such a short amount of time as well. And then I was distracted within that time, which led to unfinished work at the end of the day, and then feeling guilty for that, but also wanting to spend time with my family and help out because obviously, we had a very young son at that point. And it was like, how can I do all this? Like, my energy was getting tanked. I was still going to the gym, but I had thoughts of sacking stuff off like that just for this period of time. Or, how can I still do all this? Maybe I just have to quit the business and focus on just my jobs, right? Because I've got at the moment as there's 3 jobs and trying to build 2 businesses, okay, as well as being a dad, being a husband, being a family man, and doing good in the world. Like I do one thing or two, a couple of things within the week that are not to do with that and not to do with money or anything like that, and I just do them because I enjoy them and I want to have more impact in the world. So energy. And the reason why that's important is because I think energy is the currency of life, right? It's not money. You don't necessarily need more money. Okay, there is a practical element to that, and money does buy other things. We all want it. But energy, because if we don't have energy, right, we're not going to be a good dad. We're going to be tanked by the time we get home. We're going to have mid-afternoon slumps. Our work's going to get suffered. Our home life's going to is suffering for that because we're not going to have the capacity or the presence for our kids, the quality time. We're not going to have that for our wife. and we're not going to have that for anyone else. And so then we get to the end of the day, we feel guilty and frustrated, drains our energy more. We wake up saying we're going to do better, we don't, and we feel tired, we feel sluggish, more caffeine, all that sort of stuff, and it ends up in this, again, different type of loop. And so it gives us more energy when we get rid of distractions, because ultimately when we just focus on like one thing at a time, our brain is so much clearer. We're not mentally scattered anymore. We're not draining our energy. If we're doing a task, let's just say it's work, and we go on our phones, we instantly cut that flow off of deep work. And the problem is, even if it's just a glance at our phones, right, and we're just looking at a message, we're then having to get back into that flow. Your brain can actually only focus on sort of one thing at a time. And so when you get that slight distraction, it can take a very long time to get back into the flow of work, which probably in that moment of time trying to get back to it leads to more distraction, right? Less focus. So it gives you more energy. And of course, the big thing here is it's going to give you more time, right? And so, my program is all about resetting dopamine pathways to be able to get 10 hours back through my dopamine reset system, right? But it's going to allow for more focus, more energy, more time. Reclaiming 10 hours because we've literally got rid of the distractions. We're not endlessly watching Netflix. We're not scrolling on our phone for 6 hours a day. We're doing more work in less time, giving us more time back, unless you're stuck to a 9 to 5, but still, that doesn't matter. It means we can go home like I was after finishing work. I work at home, but finishing work, going downstairs and being available because I know all my work is done now, right? Whereas before I was worried and I was stressed and I was distracted. And then you need more distractions to feel better and sort of everything like that. So that's why we need to identify them and start to basically get rid of them. Now, of course, one of the best ways to get rid of them is to put some steps in place to do that and put some action steps in place. And part of that, right, is new features. So new tools, new optimizations, and this is how we upgrade our sort of operating system, our own operating system, into that future self, that identity self, right? So what is that? Well, we need to implement some healthier habits, right? So some sort of high performance habits. Now, I think the most important thing here, or routines. For me is routines, big time. So looking at the morning and evening routines, right? Because they bookend our day. How we go to sleep dictates the quality of sleep, which dictates how we feel when we wake up. What we do when we wake up dictates the day. But this isn't something like get up at 4 a.m., right? You've probably all seen those influencers. It's doing stuff that makes us feel good in the available time we have and being able to choose that. So the best thing you can do is choose, make a choice, right? But do some stuff. Don't just get up and go in the shower, hit snooze a million times, go in the shower and go to work. Choose what routines to do based on the amount of time you have. And really, the reason why it's a choice is because it's what you actually want to do as well. And sort of balance that out. So I think high performance habits and routines are key features that are going to do that. Because ultimately, right, what this does is, let's just have a look here. All right. Whereas these often don't feel good at the time, let's say an ice bath, but afterwards it releases a ton of dopamine. Whereas these release dopamine first and then doesn't feel good afterwards, which means we need more and then doesn't feel good. Whereas this, we don't need anymore. Okay, it releases so much dopamine that we're just gonna, and like I said, the reason why it creates more focus, energy, and time, that's going to help us as well in all of this, but it releases more dopamine over time. Okay, high performance habits and routines are also going to help us focus more. It's going to help us develop deep work habits, like I was saying, because ultimately, getting rid of distraction isn't just going to help you develop a deep work mode, right? You're going to have to be intentional about that. It's going to help you build discipline. So these routines and stuff like that, okay, ultimately it's going to help you build discipline. Now, one thing about discipline is we have to enjoy it, right? That's just, there's no point. This is why I said the choice thing there is so important, because it's important that we enjoy it. We don't just do it because some guy on YouTube told you to do it, right? It's important to do that. So, so I put high performance habits and routines, discipline. Okay, so the routine's going to build discipline. All right, now off the back of that, because we've got more routines and stuff like that, and discipline, we're going to prioritize ourselves. So that's going to be stuff like, workouts, nutrition, sleep. It could just be exercise in general. It doesn't have to be workouts, right? And it's going to help us to prioritize ourselves and others, of course, right? So, wife, kids, mates potentially. If you are having an impact in the world, so kind of like, I'll just put impact. I can't think of anything else to put. But that's what's going to help you to do, right? So when you implement new features, these new features are going to be like installing a focus mode or app limits or better AI suggestions, or like the sort of health app being updated to better tracking and new sort of interface and design, right? Because ultimately, we can get rid of the distractions and stuff like that of themselves by hitting cold turkey and relying on willpower. And we'll get somewhere, like I was saying about pulling the truck in a 100-meter sprint. But ultimately, if we don't start to do this as well and implement high performance habits and routines and start to wire our brain for discipline through enjoyment, I'll tell you what, pick a different color, right? Let's do a pink so it stands out. Enjoyment, right? And through being intentional about this stuff, and ultimately what's going to happen is we're going to get more dopamine, which means, right, we're going to want to do these things again. We're going to want to do our high performance routines and habits, right? We're going to want to be more disciplined. We're going to prioritize ourselves and then others because of that. And so it ends up in this positive sort of feedback loop, right? So the same sort of thing, the action creates the reward, but in a much different way, in a way that will continually release dopamine in much more abundance than distractions. While these routines give you energy, they give you focus, they give you more time back, right? Because you're just better, you're more focused, you've got more clarity on your priorities, and you're prioritizing yourself, your nutrition, your sleep. You're performing more like a sort of Ferrari than a tractor, okay? And that's kind of, this is, of course, we need to do the bug fixes, right? But this person here is performing like a tractor, and this person who's getting the bug fixes, adding new features, they're the person that's going to perform like a Ferrari, right? Or Lamborghini or any other high performance car. So that's the main thing to do when we've wired our brain for distractions. And how to rewire the brain for discipline is multifaceted, right? It's fixing the bugs in our current operating system, getting distractions and identifying where they are. That in turn will give us more focus, energy, and time by just doing that itself. But then to excel those, we're going to add new features as well. We're going to update some things that are currently there. And we're going to implement high performance habits and routines. We're going to do that by choosing what we actually want to do and not just what someone else says, based on the time that we have available to do that in the morning and the evening, to maximize the results that we can get from that, which is then going to help to build in discipline. But we need to enjoy the stuff we're doing to build discipline, right? You can't just do it. Now, there's going to be some pain in there, of course there is, you know. Um, but what I always think is with this, you end up enjoying the results that you get from this, the fruits that you get from this. You know, I was actually reading um, actually the Bible the other day, and in Psalm 1 it says it's like it gives this image of a tree planted by a river bears always bears good fruit, and year round because it's got that water source, right? And it's a bit like that, you know. It's a bit like that. It's like you when you have these kind of routines, habits, discipline, but you're seeing the fruits of it. You're seeing the what happens. It's a bit like that. It'll always bear good fruit, right? It's always going to bear good fruit. These things are like the river. It's always going to feed you more, and you're going to want to do them more, even though it's hard work getting in an ice bath or going to the gym or eating good food, right? You know, maybe you're doing some of those things anyway, and it just requires these slight upgrades in our operating system. Maybe it's some bug fixes, or maybe it is adding new features. Okay, I'm going to prioritize ourselves more because we've got more time back to do that, right? Because you know we've eliminated distractions, which we've got 10 plus hours back in our week. So which means we've got more time to prioritize ourselves and others, right? We can fill those 10 hours in our week back by any way we want. And for me, you know, like I said yesterday, I worked 5 hours, so I got good nutrition, good workout in, but I also spent time with the family, and they're the huge things there, right? So this this is what you need to do to rewire the brain for discipline and to get out of that distraction loop.